right, everybody. If you can find your seats, if you wouldn't mind. I mean, I suppose you could just keep standing wherever you're standing, but that would be kind of awkward. Thank you for being here at church today on this nice spring day. It's beautiful outside. I have a few announcements that I would like to tell you about. You could get the handout that are back there and just read them for yourself, but I'm going to tell you them also, just in case you don't do that. First thing, coming up on Wednesday, this Wednesday the 17th, 5:30 p.m. here in this room, we are having our Christmas party. Yeah, our annual Christmas party. Yes, all right, yeah. John's excited. Jess is excited. This is going to be a potluck, so if you come, you don't have to bring a thing. Don't be like, oh, I can't bring some food, so I'm not going to go. You can still come, but if you would like to, if you're willing to, bring something to share. There are sign-up sheets out in the commons on the tables, if you wouldn't mind signing up. Even if you're not sure what you're going to bring yet, just put your name down and say, I don't know. I'll figure something out. That's probably what I'm going to do. So you can wear a Christmas sweater if you'd like. We're going to play some games. There'll be a little area over here for the kids to hang out. So that's just going to be a good old time. Good old first Christmas fun. On the 17th at 5:30 p.m. The other thing is Christmas Eve service, 4 o'clock on Christmas Eve. Please come to that if you'd like. And the one thing I wanted to let you know about, and this applies to all weekends, but especially on Christmas Eve, we're expecting a little more people than normal. So down here this way at the vet clinic, Garland Animal Clinic, I think it's called, you can park there also. We actually even got a little sign that says Christ the King overflow parking, so it's official now. So if you show up any Sunday and you're like, oh, the lot's full, I don't want to park in the street, you can park down there if you'd like. It's still a bit of a walk, but at least it's a parking space. So utilize that on Christmas Eve if you want to, or you can just get here early, and then you don't have to worry about that at all. But that's Christmas Eve, December 24th, 4 o'clock. And Isaiah will be back with us for that, so we're excited for that. And then, again, no service on the 28th, the last Sunday of the year. Traditionally, we take that Sunday off, sleep in, spend time with your family, do whatever you want. I don't know. You can come here and sit outside if you really want to, but... And then the last thing is the tithe. This is the tithe time to tithe. If you have a tithe or offering prepared, you can give that. All the ways to give are on the screen. Thank you so much for your generosity. We really appreciate it. So this Sunday, again, we have Rory back with us. I don't know if you were here last week. I really enjoyed what he had to say. It is a blessing for him to be here with us. And he's going to be here with us this week and next week. So he's kind of like pastoring us through this Christmas season, and I'm very grateful that you've agreed to do this for us. It's really blessing us. So without further ado, if you wouldn't mind, please welcome Rory back up to the stage.
Good morning. I'm going to bring this over here. This place is starting to grow on me. I dig it. This is a good joint. I mentioned last week how much I really love your pastor, and I want to encourage you to love your pastor as well, all right? And I look around, and I was surprised the number of people that I know here. You know, I've known Corey and Kaya for a long time, and talking to Cole today, and Marcy, and other people, and Wes, I didn't know we had connections. And how many of you know my kids? Yeah, I'm always somebody's dad. It's pretty much what it is. My junior year in high school, I pretty much lived to play volleyball. That was my jam. And I grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which is on Lake Michigan. Bradford Beach on Lake Michigan is as good as any California beach in the world. In California. And I actually spent so much time at the beach and not in school that that particular semester I got a .981 grade point average. Nobody's surprised. They go like, it shows, I can tell. But after I met Jesus, the summer before my senior year in high school, I managed to bump up to a 3.7 because somehow I innately knew, you love Jesus now, you should probably behave. You should probably act like it once in a while, you know. And when I gave my life to Jesus, I knew immediately, for me, I just knew up front that I was called to do what I'm doing, to be in ministry and to just give myself full time to it. And went to Bible college, and somehow I have an undergrad degree in Bible and pastoral ministry. And somehow I managed to get that degree without ever taking a class in Greek, the original Bible language, the New Testament language. And I don't know how that happened, okay? I kind of think they all got in a room and said, we should just move this guy along and just get him, out of here. And still, I'm not particularly academic, but I love to learn. But at the church I serve, I'm surrounded by academics. I mean, I'm surrounded by really smart, I call them child pastors. I always forget we're being recorded. Last week I talked about my brother. I'm going to be in some deep yogurt with somebody. I'm surrounded by really, really smart people, and some of them with master's degrees and with all this stuff. And I love that because I glean from them. But I do love to learn, okay? I always tell people basically I'm just a country preacher, But when it comes to certain faith content for me, I know that I need to prioritize what I believe. I need to know that I know what I know for sure and for certain. And I need to love the Lord with all of my heart, soul, mind, and strength. We need to love him with our mind. And I'm hoping to take us to a little bit of school this morning without giving us sensory overload, okay? How many are students? You're students? Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do this to you if you're heading for your break. Because here's the thing. Christmas is really all about a particular theological term, okay? Christmas is all about a word, a theological word, and the word is incarnation. Everything about Christmas has to do with this idea of incarnation. I want to talk about the incarnation, its relationship to you, its relationship to me, its relationship to the world at large. And now you're like, I'm so glad I came to church today. But I promise, if I begin to see your eyes kind of glaze over, then I'll kind of change things up and talk about politics. Yes, incarnation is a theological term. It's a theological word. The incarnation, in fact, is the foundation piece of the Christian faith, the hinge pin. It's really, really incredibly an important thing. And I'm hoping that we will go from here this morning really kind of understanding that doctrine is important. The word doctrine just means correct belief, just so that I believe right. And so I don't think it's necessarily boring. Like I said, I'm not particularly academic, but I do love to learn, and I find healthy biblical content really helpful. And that theology is a good thing. That you and I believe, whatever that is, makes all the difference in the world. So incarnation is a sizable word, and I want to give us a visual, okay? You ever had carne asada? Right? And we're just going to go one by one and tell me your favorite restaurant where you get the carne asada. Chili con carne? What does carne mean? It means meat. It has meat. That's what it is. It has flesh in it. And maybe you have heard people referred to with this term carnal. They're a carnal person. It means they're fleshly, that's the priority of who they are. So incarnation is to become flesh, to take on body. That's what happened Christmas Day. That's what we're all about. It's what happened when Jesus came into the world. He became flesh like you and like me. John, one of Jesus' closer disciples, while he was alive on earth, put it in his he has 3 little books that he wrote toward the end of the New Testament, 1st, 2nd, 3rd John. And in 1st John, 1 John chapter 1, and the very beginning, he says, that which was from the beginning, which we have heard, which we have seen with our eyes, which we have looked at, our hands have touched, this we proclaim concerning the word of life. He's given us all the visibles and all the tangibles here, okay? And you won't find this in any other philosophical or religious system that the word of life could be seen and touched. That's incarnation. And then John also wrote about it in his gospel, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, chapter 1, verse 14. The word became flesh, made his dwelling among us. We've seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. That's huge, okay? That's like the marvel of it all. He's with us. As Eugene Peterson says in his famous paraphrase of that verse, the word became flesh and blood and moved into the neighborhood. God moved into our neighborhood. Or Matthew, after describing the angel that came to Joseph to explain what's happening with Mary, who was a virgin, but then she's pregnant. Joseph knew this had nothing to do with him. After explaining everything, Matthew tells us all of this took place to fulfill what the Lord had said through the prophet. The virgin will conceive and give birth to a son, and they will call him what? Emmanuel, which means God with us. And that is when theology becomes fire. That's the beauty. That's the marvels, the miracle of incarnation. God moved into the neighborhood. God with us. Incarnation. Last year, there was an interesting, about this time of year, social media thing kind of floating around. And people were asking this question: did Santa Claus punch a heretic? And anybody happen to see that? Does anybody remember that? Okay, then this is going to be educational. And it has to do with an old legend, okay? Do we have the artist depiction of it? The place is northern Turkey in 325 AD in a city by the name of Nicaea. And the church leaders there had all come together to come to a solution to an argument that's been going on about the nature of God, specifically the Trinity, that God is one God in 3 persons, Father, Son, Spirit. Constantine, the Roman emperor, who's trying to Christianize the Roman Empire at that time, got them all together, and he said, I need you guys to get in the same room, and you need to figure this out. And so they were in there, and according to legend, Nicholas was there. I talked about him a little bit last week. Nicholas later became the patron saint of children, known for gift giving and loving and kindness and generosity. Saint Nicholas, who the Dutch centuries later called Sinterklaas. And then in America in the 1800s, we started calling him Santa Claus. Some people would say Saint Nick. Now, legend has it that Saint Nicholas was here at the Council of Nicaea. Probably not true, but that's still the legend. And apparently the guy on the right is a heretic. He's a guy by the name of Arius. And the reason for the Council of Nicaea is that Arius is going around and he's telling people the incarnation as you think happened really didn't happen. Like, Jesus is not fully God. He was not God in the flesh. And he's something lesser. Maybe he's just a human. He's just a guy, just a human being. And that's what's causing all the controversy. And so legend has it that Nicholas got so upset with Arius about this thing that he got up and punched him in the face. Or at least he slapped him. And there are different versions of the story. But essentially, Santa Claus punched a heretic. And so that led to another whole different meme last year that says, it's time to give presents and punch heretics, but I'm all out of presents. The problem is that the legend really didn't develop for about 1,000 years after the Council of Nicaea. There's no record that St. Nicholas was even there, but Arius was there. And the Arian controversy was debated. It was soundly defeated, and he was pronounced a heretic. And out of this, we get a clarification of the very nature of Jesus as a result of incarnation. Some of you grew up in churches, maybe, where the Nicene Creed was read every Sunday as part of the liturgy of worship. Even though Santa Claus probably didn't punch a heretic, the Council of Nicaea gave us a great gift, and it would be considered foundational Christian theology. And so what did they say as a result of that? The Nicene Creed, I believe in one Lord Jesus Christ, the only begotten Son of God, born of the Father before all ages. And then here's the identity of Jesus. God from God, light from light, true God from true God, begotten, not made, consubstantial with the Father. In other words, equal with the Father. Not something less. Through him, they say that all things were made. And ever since, in Orthodox Christian theology, we've believed that Jesus in the incarnation is fully God and fully man. He's both in one. And because he's God and man, he is what? Emmanuel. God with us. He's with me. Now, everything hinges on this, that Jesus wasn't something less than God, but that he was God. You might wonder, okay, well, so you've given us a big word today, Christmas season, but at least you talked about Santa Claus a little bit. But why else would it be so important? First of all, it tells us real quickly and clearly, unlike what many of your friends might be telling you at work or in your classes or whatever, Jesus was more than just a moral teacher. That's the buzzword for the most part. People say, well, he was a great moral teacher. But he was so much more than that. And he certainly covered some serious moral ground in his teaching, okay? Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 5-7, where Jesus takes the big issues of the world, money, sex, power, all this stuff, and he confronts them, and he turns it all on its head, while all the time exposing the hypocrisy in our own hearts. That's Jesus at his best. Honestly, documents like the Sermon on the Mount, the Ten Commandments, some of the strongest moral teachings in the world. What if the whole world would be living out the Sermon on the Mount, if everybody lived that way? But the problem is, even though the Sermon on the Mount is such a great high standard of living that Jesus gives us, the problem with it is that it leaves us all as sinners. I want to be honest, I hate the S word. I don't like it, but that's where it leaves us. I mean, you read that and you think, I've fallen way short of that stuff. I don't even approach that stuff. And the problem with the Sermon on the Mount is it doesn't give you much in the way of hope. Sermon on the Mount by itself doesn't give, it just kind of leaves you a sinner, separated. And it gives you God's desire for your life. I want you to look like this. I want you to walk and act. And I want you to, all the stuff, and how he would want us to see ourselves, and how we're going to interact with people around us. The Apostle Paul says we've come short of the glory of God. Well, who could ever live up to that? But the Sermon on the Mount, this high moral teaching, as admirable as it is and necessary as it is, it pretty much leaves us as failures. Okay, well, Jesus is a great moral teacher. Then what about you? What about me? That means we're failures. So where does that leave us? Kind of in despair. Are you glad you came to church? Except for one thing, okay? And here's how Paul describes it. Romans chapter 8. He says, "For what the law was powerless to do because it was weakened by the flesh, God did by sending his own Son in the likeness of sinful flesh to be a sin offering. So he condemned sin in the flesh, in order that the righteous requirement of the law might be fully met in us, who do not live according to the flesh, but according to the Spirit." He says what the law was powerless to do. When I talk to people about this idea of the Ten Commandments, because oftentimes people are all about, well, I try to live the Ten Commandments. I live by the Ten Commandments. Do you know why God gave us the Ten Commandments in the first place? God gave us the Ten Commandments to show us that we can't keep the Ten Commandments. You just can't do it, and it doesn't even matter, If you ever took a paperclip home from work, you're done. You're a thief. You've stolen. So it can't happen that way. So you could cross out the word law and replace it with 10 commandments. You could put Sermon on the Mount. You could say all of God's requirements for us, what the law was powerless to do. Now, why would you call the law power? Why would you call the Sermon on the Mount powerless? Because it's weakened by the flesh, by my own failure, by my own stuff. And in ourselves, it can't be lived out. I can't do that. But what he communicated in this great teaching is that because of our humanness, our flesh, we can't live out the stuff, the requirements. For what the law was powerless to do, because it's weakened by our flesh, God did by sending his Son in the likeness of sinful what? Flesh. Incarnation. He took on flesh. He entered the arena that we live in, our neighborhood. And he did it to be a sin offering. That's what happened when he died on the cross. That's why he took on a body. That's why he did what he did, to actually take your place, to take my place regarding sin, separation from God. And so he condemned sin in the flesh in order that the righteous requirements of the Sermon on the Mount would actually be fully met then in us. Because we no longer have to live by the flesh, which keeps failing us, keeps succumbing to temptation. But we can now live according to the Spirit, this resurrection power of God. And that's why it's so important that Jesus be more than just a moral teacher, why the incarnation is so important for us to understand. He came in the flesh to take on the weakness of the flesh that makes us unable to obey God. So let's get way practical. If you're struggling with alcohol today, if you're struggling with drug addiction, if you're struggling with anger, if you're struggling with sexual addiction or pornography, if you're struggling with bitterness, resentment, if you're struggling with judgmentalism, all of the stuff that Jesus hits in the Sermon on the Mount as a great moral teacher, please hear me, they died when Jesus took on flesh. The power of sin in the flesh was dealt with because he, at Christmas, took on flesh. My goal this morning would be that your faith would take on some fresh parameters and be added to, no longer placing faith in your own self-discipline, not even having faith in your accountability systems, and rather that we would transition our faith into what Jesus did for you only, that's everything that you need. He took on flesh to defeat sin in the flesh so that we can obey God by the power of the Holy Spirit. And that's step one in this radical importance of incarnation. How are we doing? Pastor Grant up at Summit will stop us sometimes and he'll say, would you just take a deep breath with me? And so we all take a deep breath. Now, the doctrine of incarnation is important because when we get it wrong, when we don't understand it, we actually begin to think of ourselves as little gods. Follow me. We are not the incarnation of Jesus. Being fully God and fully human is a status you and I will never have. We are not divine. He was human and he was divine. And he was the creator God and human at the same time. That's the incarnation. That's not true of you or me. Unfortunately, in branches of the charismatic or the Pentecostal church today, certain apostolic reformation movements among certain percentage of television personalities, we begin to see them compromise the doctrine of the incarnation. And you'll hear them teach that Jesus, when he was born in Bethlehem, was no longer divine. He was just human. Or that he limited his divinity for 33 years that he was with us, just operating only as a human being. In other words, the incarnation didn't apply to those 33 years. Why? You know, I actually have some sympathy for the intent of what they're preaching, because the Spirit of God anointed Jesus. He did signs and wonders. He healed people. He walked on water. He multiplied food. He did all kinds of really great stuff. And he is to be our model. We as human beings can also be in relationship with God like he was in relationship with God. We too can do all of the things that Jesus did and maybe even greater things. But I don't believe that you need to make Jesus less divine to make the case that his resurrection spirit can fill us, that he can use us as we pray for, as we minister to people and care for people. But it's taken kind of a different direction right now. It's really troubling within certain movements, because we do believe that he lived as a human being in relationship with God in the power of the Spirit. The same way that you and I can actually do that. Live in relationship with God in the power of the Spirit. And so what we're hearing is that when he died on the cross, you know, it wasn't a moment of him defeating the flesh. It was a moment of him actually losing to Satan. That Satan won at the cross. And that he then went to hell and he was tortured for 3 days. They'll say that he died spiritually. The idea being, well, that if he died spiritually, he's really no longer God. But while he was in hell, where our atonement really took place, he was born again. And then he rose from the dead, and then he regained his divinity. That becomes the open door then for you and for me. And then we come to him and we're born of the Spirit and we become little gods. And faith isn't actually trusting in God. Faith is like a force of some kind. And somehow we muster it up. And we act on it, this force. And they would say God created the world through the force of faith. And then they'll teach that we are little messiahs, just like Jesus. There's no real difference. And we can manipulate the force of faith through our words and our proclamations, and we can then create reality around us. It's really just pure New Age stuff. That's really all it is. Even though we kind of sanctify it by saying we do it in the name of Jesus, but then we create reality by what we think and what we speak. And we're acting on the law of attraction and all that kind of stuff. Or you speak positive things and you think positive things, and you're going to change reality all around you. It's just New Age thinking is really all it is. And honestly, people are buying into this kind of New Age theology. And it's filtering into the church, telling you and telling me that we're little gods. And we can manipulate the universe just like gods. But that actually leaves us in a pretty bad way. And it all starts with beginning to play around with the incarnation of Jesus, that he wasn't as human, fully God. Just trying to open the door for us to be little gods like him. And so please be very careful what you're hearing and listening to in Christian media. Be discerning. Because the sensational is often an aberration of the real. The real is more basic than we realize. Bottom line, God became flesh. For 33 years on this earth, he was fully God, he was fully man. And it wasn't in hell that Jesus took your sin and mine. It was on the cross. He defeated the power of the flesh. And it was in his resurrection power, his own resurrection life, that he told us, you can be forgiven because of my experience on the cross. You can have a new life. And my resurrection spirit can come into you and you can be born again. What does the Bible tell us? The same spirit that raised Jesus from the dead lives in you and me. You'll never be God, but you can belong to me. You can have my life. You can actually then live out my moral teachings in your life because of that. Your life can change. See, that's the gospel of Jesus. That's really good news. That's good Christmas news. Now, one of my favorite passages that helps me to kind of put feet to this faith and this idea is found in Ecclesiastes, the Old Testament book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 5. He says, guard your steps when you go to the house of God. Go near to listen rather than to offer the sacrifice of fools who do not know what they do wrong. Do not be quick with your mouth. Do not be hasty in your heart to utter anything before God. God is in heaven and you're on earth. So let your words be few. I say it pretty often when I talk to people. The bottom line is he's God and I'm not. Let me read this from the Revised Rory version. He's God, you're not, so keep your mouth shut. I mean, that's really what it says. God's God, and you and I are not. So be very careful regarding what you say. We want to be very careful that we not diminish the divinity of Jesus and elevate the divinity of human beings. I mean, that's kind of the ultimate goal of the enemy, make gods of ourselves. I'm thankful Jesus was born of a virgin, an earthly mother, not an earthly father. He's fully God, fully man, and everything else builds on that. That's the foundations. And I'm so thankful that he died for my sin. He defeated sin, flesh, defeated. He's more than just a moral teacher. And he's coming back. So at this time of the year, I find myself feeling pretty grateful. The incarnation means that God isn't distant from us. He is God with us. Now, the Jewish mind couldn't handle this idea because they were looking for a conquering king like David. Somebody's going to come and he's going to save us from the Romans and he's going to beat them up and he's going to wage war and everything's going to be groovy. So for him to be born in the same weakness as our flesh, and instead he gets crucified, and they believe, the Jews believe, and anyone who hung on a cross was cursed, So Jesus didn't quite fit the mold, actually. Jesus didn't fit anybody's mold because there's nobody like him. He's the God-man, came to save the world. Now, the Greeks believed in what they called the apatheia of God. That Greek word apatheia, I didn't learn that in college, by the way. I had to look it up on my own. Well, we get the word apathetic from that. They believe the spiritual is right, the invisible, the spiritual part is good, but the flesh, not so much. In some cases, it's even evil because it's not spirit, evil. So a God couldn't be a God if that God was touched by suffering. If that God was subject to the same things that you and I are subject to, what we experience in our flesh, or if he was subject to temptation. So they believed in the apathy of God. Let me read to you from 1 Corinthians chapter 1. Jews demand signs. Greeks look for wisdom. But we preach Christ crucified, a stumbling block to Jews and foolishness to Gentiles. That's why he was incarnated, to have a body that would be crucified. And Paul said it's a stumbling block for Jews. They don't get it. And it's foolishness to Gentiles because they can't understand a God who could be touched by suffering. And then he says in 1 Corinthians 1:24, but to those whom God has called, both Jew and Greeks, Christ, the power of God and the wisdom of God. And that's the story of Christmas, kids. I know it's a lot to ingest, but maybe the Spirit has helped you this morning to see something with fresh eyes. Just that you could comprehend the amazing weightiness of the God who loves you so very deeply and who's done all that he possibly could to bring you back to his heart. And I'm pretty confident to declare to you that this could possibly end up being the most life-changing Christmas you've ever had when you get that figured out and when you apply that and you ingest that. My heart for you is simply that you would, if you haven't, make that decision. The Bible doesn't really talk about people becoming Christian. They talk about the words of Jesus where he says, you need to deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow me. The psalmist said, my soul follows hard after you. I want to follow Jesus so close that if he stops, I bump into him. And if you're not following him, this could be your moment. Just say, I want to follow you. I want to know you. And it can be an imperfect first step. But more than anything else, that he wants you to know he really did come to be like us and to take on him everything that we deal with so that he would be the kind of God that we can trust and that we can walk in. Would you set your things aside and pray with me? Jesus, in this simple moment together, I would ask that that you would do what you do best by your Spirit, because we do believe that we are Trinitarians and that the Spirit is God, is Jesus, is the Spirit. And so right now, do what you do best in loving our hearts and caring for us and walking close to us and holding us. And Lord, for those of us that deal with the stuff of the flesh, which is all of us, that you would be very close and help us to understand, really, why did you come? Why were you born like that? Why did you go through all this stuff? And it was for our benefit, and it was for our good, and it was for our eternity. And so this morning, anyone that needs to make a decision to follow you, you're just a prayer away. They can talk to you, even in this moment while we're praying. They can say, Jesus, I don't even fully comprehend it, but I know I want to follow you. I know that you have done more for me than anybody, any philosophy, any religion, any system of thought, that you personally did what you did for me. Lord, receive us this morning. Amen? Amen. Would you stand with me? I know that there will be church leadership, Corey and others hanging around. And if you want to talk about that, if somebody brought you this morning, just kind of look at them and go, I did that thing, I made that decision. And they'll help you and they'll walk with you. And you can become a part of a really fabulous community here that'll help you walk with Jesus, okay? So now may this Christmas season be fresh for you and new for you and deep for you and weighty for you. And may Jesus be more real than he's ever been before. God bless you. Have a great week in the Lord.